Dear viewer, remember that it's okay to have your own opinion. In fact, worse than having an unpopular one would be you not researching the subject and just going along with the flow because you want to be angry or feel special because you're fighting for something that, well, you may not even know of. But the thing with shows like Dear White People is that people forget you can love it or hate it because you're still open to your own opinion. You can watch Dear White People and say, you know what, artistically, the way they tell the story, it's just not working for me. And guess what? That doesn't make you a racist. The same way that if you watch the show, you binge it, and you end up loving it, that doesn't mean that you're the savior of all racial tensions. This, like many shows like it, is just a TV series that, even better than giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, is the fact that it's opening up discussions. So what I decided to do before actually talking about the show was actually watch the show. So for those who don't know anything about it, the show pretty much takes place in a very, very Ivy League university where a half-black, half-white student has a radio show segment titled Dear White People. She bluntly voices her opinion on that show, and of course that causes a stir in the TV series just like it does in real life. The show, of course, then dives into the racial tensions that are happening at this very, very prestigious university, which I don't want to say that it's completely disconnected from real life where people are actually working jobs and their whole 4 years of university isn't paid for and, you know, everything's so luxurious, but it kind of felt like when Spike Lee made Chirac in order to be able to help the gang violence that was happening in Chicago, but I don't think any gang members were looking forward to a modern Greek musical about themselves. So personally, I thought the first couple of episodes were okay. They reminded me a lot of the movie, which had the same title that came out in 2014, which should have told everyone that, yeah, this isn't a white genocide story, but the movie, I felt, putting all the subject matter to the side, was so hipster that it just was overwhelming. It also had a lot of storylines that it tried to cram into just a very limited amount of time, so I thought that it felt very muddled. As for the series, they pretty much take all the elements from the movie, like not only the plot and expanding on it, but the fact that they are trying to make fun of different stereotypes, not just of white, but also of black, of Asian, and I think they had like one Mexican in the show, but pretty much they're always breaking the fourth wall. It's very satirical. There are points where you can't tell what they're parodying or if it is meant to be a parody or not, and I guess that's what's kind of fun about it. But for me, I personally started digging it when we got to the 4th episode, and it's in that 5th episode that everything completely changes, and I was like, okay. And that's why I think it's very important to watch the thing, because if I would have just made a video because I knew that my opinions hadn't changed about the movie and that I saw the teaser, which I completely think is still horrendous on Netflix's part, I would have made something that would have been pretty ignorant because, one, I wouldn't have given the benefit of the doubt to the creators who created something, and I would have been judging something they made without watching it. Two, I ended up really digging the second half of this show, and if I was being that ignorant, I would have missed out on that. And like I said, you are not required to like the show, but you really can't have an opinion until you watch it. And once you watch it, yeah, you can hate it. It cannot be for you. It doesn't matter. This is something that a lot of people like to do, that because the subject matter is so important, you're not allowed to say anything bad. If the show isn't your style, then it isn't your style, and that's completely fine. However, for me, I ended up digging the way that they told the story, how artistic it looked. It's still very hipsterish, but they toned it back a bit. But I love how they fleshed out the characters and where you got to know them. And even though you didn't agree with all of them, or I personally didn't agree with some, and even the ones that I liked made mistakes, they felt like real people. Now, a major part of that comes from the fact that they're able to flesh out the story. The fact that they have the perfect 10-episode season that I always say you should never go more than 10 episodes. And even better than that is that they don't have those 45-minute episodes where, like, half of it is filler. They're less than 30 minutes, and each episode focuses on a different character, and that way every single scene is moving the story along. That being said, the only way that you'll know if you like or hate the show is if you give it a chance. And of course, this has sparked something of a bigger debate than just binge watching a show for entertainment because of the way that it handles race and the message, or to some people, agenda that it's trying to deliver. And this brings me back to something that you need to break down before you can even talk about the show. these two extreme sides. If you've seen my videos, you know that I think that this whole Republican versus Democrat, left versus right, white versus black is like, I don't know, it's like the dumbest thing you can think of because one, you both have aspects that are bad. We both have bad sides to all of us. And the fact that is, if you're just focusing on one side, you're ignoring all the positive aspects of the other. For example, as much as I like this show, I can still admit that is one of the dumbest titles you can think of.
If you want to target someone or something, you need to target that specific. So the smart thing would have been, say, hey, dear racist people, not dear white people, not dear black people. Because if it was reversed, I would have been mad. I would have went on Twitter and say, what the fuck is wrong with that general amount of people that came up with that.
And so I start dissecting the sides, and I'm looking at this side over here, who is all for the show. Some who haven't even seen the show, but they're defending it. Again, just like the other side, you gotta watch it. But I'm thinking of the people who created this, sat in a room, full-grown people, and said, yeah, this is the perfect title. Like, you know that this was going to get people upset. Like, it is the most condescending title out there, to the point that even actors from the show itself talked about how they didn't like it.
So when the film first came out, I saw the title and I was like, okay, you know, it's cool, but I don't know if I'm gonna go to the theater to see it.
Right.
So I wasn't necessarily enticed by the title, which is very reminiscent of what's happening with our show right now.
Yeah.
I get the idea that any publicity is good publicity, and I mean, it helped because a lot of people started talking about it, but I almost see it like those Christian films, you know, the ones that end up just preaching to the choir and they don't really bring in the unbelievers and convert them the way that, you know, their stories are meant to be done. I see the same thing here, in where I feel they've alienated all the people who, you know, are part of the racial tension, and you're just, again, preaching to the choir of the people who already agree with you. And I don't know, I feel like they put themselves in a hole and limited themselves because they wanted this very edgy title. As for the other side, it's funny because they're the ones who like to call the other side snowflakes, yet they look like Olaf walking around complaining about a show that they haven't even seen, that they're calling KKK black version propaganda. And it's funny because there are elements in the show, legit, that the left side would look at it and be like, yo, what is this? And the right side would be like, hey, I actually agree with this. Not only are there characters that are being called out by other black characters for what they're doing, there's episodes directed by a white dude, there's a whole episode from the perspective of a white dude. There's the fact that towards the end of it, they even call out, yo, these tactics that you're doing, they're not gonna get you anywhere. In other words, this whole sports team mentality, you guys need to find a middle ground and stop labeling each other and actually listen to each other. And that's actually something I like from the show. There's not really a villain, like the white characters or the opposing black characters. There's never really a villain, and they're constantly getting into debates and arguments, yet there's never like a definitive winner. It pretty much shows you that all of these things that we do for change, sometimes like at the end of the series, it doesn't really matter. Instead, it raises a lot of questions. It allows you to examine yourself. It looks at different perspectives, like one of the main ones being between the main characters, Sam and Coco, and where Coco's more of the passive MLK type person, whereas Sam is the Malcolm X, very aggressive and all up in your face type person. You see the pros and cons to both of their sides, and the show shows you how even minorities within themselves build stereotypes because they don't want to be this or that.
There's this interesting thing in the black community of staying real, you know, never going away or forgetting where you come from type of thing, and always representing the community well, which is frustrating in a lot of ways and stressful as well, because so many different parts, like any community of the black community, have different opinions. So it's hard to please everybody and stay black and proud.
There's even a point in the show where the main character, Sam, declines working with Kurt, even though, like, that's the whole point for them to work together, and by the end of it, she realizes, yeah, maybe the route I went wasn't the correct route. They even bring up how sometimes people just want to be victims. They just want something to complain about, and really, they'll never be satisfied because then what will they have to protest?
You do realize all we do is complain about things.
It is as though Americans would have no identity if not for their near constant outrage. I know so much about what you don't like. What do you all like, eh?
Now, I do think it's important to pretty much talk about who the show is tailored for, because yes, everyone's allowed to watch the show, love it or hate it, and it is a show that, again, like the title, claims that it's addressing a certain group, but it's really not. It's important to know that it's a black show from the black perspective, and that's not a bad thing. We live in a world where this ideology that, oh, we don't see color, everyone's the same, we're all just human beings, and there's no differences between it. That's a lie. Like, literally, you can take the most minuscule thing like getting a haircut. The way that I go get a haircut is completely different than the way a white person gets a haircut, and as you see in the show, is completely different than the way a black person gets a haircut. And it's those differences that give us different perspectives. I can see a movie like Barry Jenkins' Moonlight, which he directed one of the best episodes in this series, which is episode 5. But Moonlight is a movie you can connect to, you can admire, which I do, but I'm not a gay little black boy. And the thing is that if Moonlight was tailored differently so it can become my favorite movie of the year or of all time, then it wouldn't be that other person's favorite movie, because it's not then tailored for them. It's okay to have our differences because that's what makes us part of who we are. Not everything is going to be universal, and that's what makes it great. As scary as it may be to some people, it's okay to acknowledge that we're all different colors. Overall, I think the main idea is to actually give people a chance. Like, for the show, you can hate it, you can love it, but don't form your opinion until you actually give it a chance and watch it, and then love it or hate it, whatever you want to do about it. It's the idea that we should stop fighting for one side, and instead we should be fighting for each other, to find that middle ground, to recognize that, you know what, maybe the opposing side of us, they make good points, and to acknowledge that, hey, even within our own groups, there's some jacked up stuff, and there's things that are wrong. It's realizing that not everything is black and white. Sincerely, a Mexican.